up? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I am Morrow, your storyteller for today, and we have not just a two-part, but a three-part story about a player that apparently loses the fingers over a sword. I have no idea what's going on, but you know what? It's a three-parter, it's pretty chunky, and we're gonna go ahead and get to it. GM thinks player with oversized sword ruins his game world. Takes a finger as revenge. When I was in college, some friends introduced me to D&D. I instantly got hooked, and group I was in was fabulous. We played many different games, campaigns for 3 to 4 years we were together. Fast forward to 2016, I had just graduated and moved to a different state for work. After a few months of settling in, I decided I wanted to try to find a new group. One day at work, I mentioned that I wanted to get back into D&D to a coworker, Billy, and he mentioned that a game he was GMing just wrapped up. He went on to say that he was interested in starting a new game with other coworkers and asked if I wanted to join. I accepted, as he seemed like a good guy, and I honestly felt more comfortable playing with coworkers than people I didn't know. After asking around, Billy and myself managed to recruit enough people to start up a game. The group assembled at the GM Billy's apartment for session 0. We were playing Pathfinder, and most of the players were brand new to TTRPGs aside from Billy and his wife. Everyone I didn't already know from work seemed friendly. Billy advised us of his rules, which included things to make sure that players stayed comfortable and weren't thrown into any type of uncomfortable or uncontrollable situation. The main rule, however, was that we could only build characters using the core rulebook, since the majority of the table was new players. Okay, cool, no issues there. I'll admit I was a bit bummed as I already had a class picked out, but no worries, core keeps things simple. The night ended with Billy handing us a pre-built character sheet to run a short combat session. Overall, I left the first meeting feeling positive. The next day, myself and the rest of the players created a group chat to start working on character concepts. I decided that since they were new, I would wait until others had picked to fill out what was needed. A few days later, everyone had picked and we ended up with a monk, cleric, bard, and sorcerer, who was Billy's wife. I decided I was going to play fighter. A few days before session 1, I showed Billy my character, a not so smart or wise human named Jorum, who, with some feet work, wielded an oversized bastard sword. Billy had some concerns. So, you're playing a male fighter who's big and dumb. Are you going to be able to RP a man properly? Yes, I played male characters before with no issue. Just know that I take RP encounters very seriously and I will hold you to character. Just make sure you keep up the act. I feel like I should point out that I prefer to play male characters in RPGs, even though I'm female. I learned sort of quickly that NPCs and players tend to point out that you're a girl when you play one and want to RP as such, so it's easy just to be a man's man. If that works for you, that works for you. I come from an MMO background and I learned very early on from a young age that sometimes some guys want to play as girls and girls want to play as guys. I actually dated a girl back in the day that really liked to play World of Warcraft, and she played as the biggest, buffest dudes that you could possibly make, with big chunky shoulder plates on big weapons and big armor. But then alternatively, I also meet a bunch of dudes that just want to play dainty little cat girls from Final Fantasy XIV. I am one of those dudes that wanted to play a dainty little cat girl from Final Fantasy XIV. But hey, play what you want to play, you like what you like, so just roll with it. Shortly after that conversation, we had our first session. Things were good at first. The party met up at some small tavern in some small town, standard adventure fare. Joram and Monk became quick friends, with Monk vowing to someday round out some of the Joram's sharp edges. The party left town for the big city to complete a quest that was given to them by the mayor. On the way out, the party got into the first ever combat encounter together, and oh dear lord, that first combat encounter. We were ambushed by a band of 4 to 5 highway robbers. Everybody but Monk and Sorcerer rolled horrible initiative, which meant most of the party was taking their turns after the enemies. Monk goes first and rolls his first dice of the game. Crit failure. After rolling from a table, Billy announces that the monk has hit himself, below the belt, which caused him to be stunned for, rolls d20, 4 turns. Monk's player is visibly upset, as he knows he's most likely out for the rest of the encounter. Billy announces that it's Sorcerer's turn, and his wife picks up the dice. 1 turn missed? Yeah, I could probably understand if you wanted to go for more punishing crit fumble table, sure. But 4 turns? Bruh, what is the DM doing? You completely not allowing the monk player play at all. Average combat in D&D takes about 3 to 4 turns before it's fully resolved. I don't know how it is in Pathfinder. I've been told both it's fairly quick and it's fairly chunky and takes a while. Pathfinder players, let me know how long the combat on average takes. Still, 4 turns sounds very, very punishing. Quick side note, when I first met Sorcerer during Session 0, she bragged about playing Pathfinder for years with Billy, and specifically mentioned how she only played Sorcerer because she knew the ins and outs of the class super well, and loved big flashy fire magic. Somehow with the combination of RP, asking Billy what her spells did, pondering the best location to use area spells, and theory crafting the ideal attacks, Sorcerer managed to make her turn last 21 real world minutes. Sorcerer kept the long trend up and caused a bunch of other issues during the campaign, but that's a story for another time. By the time she decided on the play she wanted to do, most everyone at the table had checked out and were looking up stuff on their phones, including me. Yeah, 21 minutes is a little bit too long. I think you should probably have a cutoff time of like 5 minutes. When it's not your turn, you have all the time in the world to plan out what you want to do. Sometimes it can be as easy as, I use Eldritch Blast and end my turn. You can still take your time on other people's turns and strategize and try to react of like, if this enemy moves up here, I'm gonna use this spell against them to try to counter it and be able to support my ally to make sure that they're not, you can still strategize what's other people's turn. Don't take 21 minutes on your turn making everybody wait. I get if the player is new, but she says she has experience, so I mean, there should be no excuse for her not to be able to plan things out. Why is she taking so long? Sorcerer's spell managed to deal light damage to one of the enemies, which led to them taking their turns. Finally, it was my turn. Joram swung his big sword and got a lucky roll, dealing max damage and outright one-shotting one of the highwaymen. With another lucky roll, I downed another, and I had the ability to let me attack multiple targets in a turn so long as they were next to each other. Billy paused the combat and asked for my character sheet. I handed it to him, and a few minutes later he hands it back and says, "We need to talk." Uh-oh, I think this is where this story is gonna go really bad. He brings me outside of the balcony and starts lecturing about how power gaming is in poor taste, blah blah. I said that I wasn't trying to sneak anything by him or power game, and had shown him my exact character early in the week, reminding him on the conversation we had previously. He grumbled a bit and said that oversized bastard swords will look too silly for a normal-sized fighter to wield, and his campaign was too serious to allow it. It ruins the game world I created. I offered to change weapons before the next session, or roll a new fighter outright, but he declined, saying, "Just don't surprise me with anything else." At this point, I'm uncomfortable, looking up at a 6-foot-tall angry GM, and just want to get back inside, so I agree. The session ended shortly after, with the rest of the highway robbers running away and nobody else getting a combat turn. What? They already ended the combat? Nobody else got to fight just because of one fighter just being overpowered? I mean, maybe not being overpowered. Clearly the GM, Billy, right, checked through the sheet ahead of time and he could have decided, oh, I'm cool with that, but I'm not cool with that, Just out of nowhere decides, oh, now it's going to be a problem. Billy, if it's a problem, you should have let him know ahead of time. God forbid lucky rolls cause him to cause damage. Listen, TTRPGs is like half of actual strategy and then half of luck. Sometimes you can be completely out of luck, and no matter what build you make, you will always be just absolutely shafted by low rolls and crit fumbles and everything. It's influenced by the randomness of the dice. Sometimes the dice can be punishing and gives you a natural one. And therefore, that cool action you wanted to do just simply won't work. And sometimes you get a natural 20, sometimes multiple times, and then you just end up dominating the battlefield. TTRPGs, D&D, Pathfinder, they're half game of strategy and half game of luck. Sometimes you get lucky rolls, sometimes you get unlucky rolls. I don't know why the fighter is being punished for getting lucky. At this point, I was honestly thinking about leaving the game, as the first session left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. But I continued anyway, as I didn't want to deal with awkwardness at work. Plus, I really just wanted to play D&D. During the next session, the party finds a cave and, after a few puzzles, happen upon a chest with multiple magic items in it. Monk gets hand wraps that work with his abilities, Sorcerer gets a cloak that gives her an extra spellcasting, and the others get something that helps their class. I find a magic ring. After making a particularly high spellcraft roll, Sorcerer tells me that the ring will improve my chance to hit by 2. This effect just so happened to negate the penalty I take from using an oversized weapon, so I ecstatically put it on. Immediately my HP starts to drop, and starting from the finger, the ring was on my arm blackens. It turns out the ring Joram so carelessly put on is cursed. Maybe now he will think twice about equipping random items for a dungeon without getting them properly checked first. Why would Joram think that the ring was cursed? Not only did everyone else get non-cursed items, Sorcerer rolled really high as well on that check and pretty confidently told me it was safe. I'm not sure what else I could have done there. This is a powerful curse item. Sometimes you can't always trust your party to get things right. What? That sounds stupid. DM, what the hell? The sorcerer checked through the ring. If the ring was cursed and they got a really high spellcraft roll, then I'm assuming they'll be able to identify if the ring was cursed or not. What the hell? It's like you punishing somebody. It's literally DM just punishing somebody for just doing well at the game. It'd be one thing if the player was going for like a busted min-max build for like Fighter and Pathfinder, but wielding a giant oversized sword that already gives you a penalty, you're already taking a penalty as it is. You just got really lucky rolls. And the DM saying you shouldn't trust the party. What do you mean shouldn't trust the party? The whole point of D&D, Pathfinder, or any TTRPGs is that cooperative play, where you can't rely on your own skills at all times. You gotta rely on your party's skills. And if you tell the sorcerer the item is fine, then the item should be fine. It seriously sounds like the DM is just trying to be bitter and just punish the player just for, what, playing well? Not even playing well, getting lucky rolls. That's all it is. That's literally all it is. She got lucky rolls and now she's being punished for it. What the hell? I try to take the ring off, but of course it won't come off. Billy tells me that I have 2 minutes real world time to find a way to remove it or Joram will die. In the end, everything that everyone tries doesn't work and we end up cutting off the finger that the ring was on. Billy announces that because I am now missing a finger, I had to take additional penalties to attack as well as any skills that requires the use of that hand. Can it be restored or healed at a temple? Short answer, no. The cursed ring was so powerful that any attempt would fail for sure. Is there a magic item that's not cursed that I could have from the chest? No. I asked him later out of character if there was any solution other than cutting my finger off, but he dodged the question with, nothing that your character would think up with his low intelligence. Not only are you causing a gotcha moment with the player whenever they try to put on a magical ring on them, then you also punish them, not allow them to recover in any way, and suddenly now they have to suffer a permanent penalty. Hey, DM, just tell the player, hey, I don't want you in my game anymore, or re-roll another character. You could just do that instead of this whole fiasco. There's still plenty of horror to write about from the campaign, including my character forcefully getting retailed due to receiving a 35-year jail sentence in a quiet, inescapable prison, his replacement getting nerfed to the point of being unplayable, and Sorcerer's multiple meltdowns when she isn't being treated like the main character by the rest of the party. Oh, we are 100% getting to the next story. We are 100% getting to the next story. Let's roll story number 2. GM still upset of a player with big sword decides to forcefully remove it from the game. As a brief reminder, the most important names to remember are Joram, my fighter, Billy, GM, Monk, and Sorcerer, GM's wife. Rewinding to a bit before the first session, one thing Billy wanted for us to do was to create some sort of engaging backstory that could inspire subplots or help with character development down the line. Alright, awesome. Backstories are great. Billy even started a Skype group for the game that, alongside a work chat, could be used to help the new players develop their character backstories. As some commenters mentioned in the last post, yes, I did end up borrowing from Pathfinder Iconic Barbarian when creating the character and backstory. Joram was a fighter from a prestigious clan of warriors who passed down a large bastard sword. The sword was claimed a long time ago from a great battle with a giant and was given to the person who won in a contest of strength against the current leader. The warrior who received the sword was exiled from the clan until they got word of the current leader imminent demise. They would come back and take over as the leader of the clan with new experiences and adventures to guide the future decision making. Somewhat basic, I know, but I figured it was easy enough to work with and explain why Joram carried around and used a large bastard sword. Picking up from where we left off last time, session 304 started and party ends up finding a secret document that more or less explained the main story hook of the campaign. Orcs, goblins, and some evil kingdom led by the BBEG, of course, are gathering together in a massive numbers in an attempt to take over the entire kingdom. Something like that. The party, not really knowing what to do with the newly acquired information, decided to continue to the capital city to deliver the document along with the mayor's request from the starting down to the kingdom. Sorcerer objected to our plan immediately. You see, Sorcerer had played a different campaign with a different party as different Sorcerer in the same homebrew world. The campaign we were playing was 30 or so years after the previous one, so the histories were still very much connected. Sorcerer out of character tells us about a village close to the capital city filled with spies, espionage, experts, and the shadow ruler of the entire kingdom. She continued by telling us it wasn't too far away and would be a much better place to deliver important documents to. She pretty much repeats the same thing, but in character. Monk asks if he could pause the game for a second and calls out Sorcerer for using knowledge her character shouldn't know. Uh-oh, Sorcerer's metagaming. It kinda just ruins the pacing for everybody because now, instead of people learning it diegetically or naturally or normally, now they're learning because the Sorcerer decided just to spoil the big chunk of the story because it's related to the other homebrew game from the past. Thanks, Sorcerer. Now all the fun is ruined. Hey, just out of curiosity, how would your character know this? Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but didn't we all establish we were new to the adventuring? This place sounds pretty secretive for just any old person to know about. She would just know about it from a book or something. She's pretty smart and well read. I'm not quite sure that's how that works, is it? Her previous character from this world is her great-grandmother. She passed it down in a diary. It's backstory. One thing to mention is that Billy was staring daggers into me the entire time we paused the game. I can't remember if he was also staring at Monk, but I don't think he did. Wow, DM, how convenient that your wife Sorcerer just has meta information because it's part of the backstory. Convenient. I feel like Sorcerer is going to be just well, actually, the OP did say that a Sorcerer did have a big main protagonist syndrome going on, and I'm pretty sure the DM encouraged that. We resume the game and decide to just go with Sorcerer to the super secret town where the Shadow Ruler lives. On the way, we stop at a mountain keep that has been converted into some sort of rest stop with food, drinks, and an inn. Bard, Monk, and I decide to have fun and spend some coin by drinking, dancing, and participating in various other bar activities. Barmaid comes up to me during this and asks if I would like to hang out with her. I politely decline as I'm having fun with my friends. She insists, offering free drinks if I would. Again, I decline and go back to the arm wrestling contest I'm currently having with the Bard. The other player gets some scenes, and then I'm told to roll multiple reflex saves, each with an increasing number of penalties for being various stages of drunk, despite only having brought one drink to the entire night. Eventually, I fail one of these saves and gasp, oh no, I've just accidentally hit the barmaid with my mug, spilling the remainder of my drink all over her Sunday best. Okay. Oh, I don't like where this is going. DM. If the player decides their player character just wants to bro it out, drink with his adventure buddies, and arm wrestle, you let him arm wrestle. You don't do this weird like, ooh, a barmaid encounter scene. What is this? This feels cheesy and lame. She's really mad and starts loudly slinging swears at you. You can see the rage in her eyes. I'm terribly sorry, miss. I must have not been paying attention. My mistake. Joram tries to say that, but because he's so drunk, he comes out in slurs and sounds much ruder than intended. Because of the failed reflex, he stumbles while talking and accidentally pushes her down. I am sensing a bit of a forced essay in this. The scene went on for a little while with nothing I could do to calm down. At one point, I even pulled out a few gold to pay for the ruined clothes, hoping that would smooth it over, but the gold was slapped out of my hand. To be honest, I was a bit confused over the entire thing out of character. Eventually, this scene died down a bit with the owner coming over to smooth things over. He even offered to comp our rooms for us. How nice! We accepted the offer and headed to bed for the evening. Okay, no essay, but I mean, that's still really weird. What was the DM trying to do there? I was kind of sensing that DM was going to do something really creepy there. Like really, really creepy. The party wakes up in the morning to a mostly empty inn or tavern and quickly notices that all of our stuff, minus the clothes we slept in, is gone. Panicked, we rush to the front where we find the owner who tells us not to worry. Each morning, staff comes by to collect our stuff and wash clothes, polishes items, and sharpens blades. After waiting around a bit, the party gets all of their items back. Everything missing was returned good as new and with some temporary bonuses applied. Now when I say everyone, I mean everyone but Joram. Joram got most of his stuff back, but his sword was mysteriously missing. Looking out the window after rolling some perception checks, the party noticed the barmaid from the previous night smashing Joram's heirloom sword on a stone path leading to the back door of the tavern, with chunks flying off the blade. Sword almost snapped in half. Wait. It's an oversized giant bastard sword that still gives the fighter a penalty for swinging? Not to say the barmaids can't be strong, but just an average regular barmaid just be able to smash it to smithereens just like that? How durable or heavy is this sword? Because as far as I know, it's supposed to be like some sort of legendary heirloom that literally gives fighter a penalty for swinging it, but apparently a regular citizen could just smash up this sword on a payment without an issue. Apparently. Before the party could stop him, Joram ran out at the tavern to try to stop his sword from being completely destroyed by yelling, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop it." The barmaid dropped the sword, spun around, and pulled out a dagger. I yelled to the party, "I have a blade raised against me." I lunged at the barmaid. "Are you sure you want to do that? I mean, I'm seemingly caught a thief red-handed who not only stole from me, but is actively threatening me with a dagger. See no reason why I wouldn't hold back." "Alrighty, everyone roll initiative." Bit of a side tangent here. I was both upset as a player, as a character at this point. Although I wasn't particularly attached to playing fighter with large sword, I did feel like I was being punished for something I didn't know I did wrong. I had specifically asked during the first session if Billy wanted me to change my backstory and weapon focus, and he said no to both. If this was some character specific development based on my backstory wasn't, then I might have understood, but even then I would have liked to have that kind of conversation prior to the session taking place. Something Billy had mentioned to me in a prior session was I needed to be careful with the weapon and make sure I didn't break it, as no one would be able to fix it or craft another for anything shy of 9,000 gold. Losing my sword here would leave me weaponless with a handful of useless feats, at least for a little bit, and really impact my backstory in a negative way. The idea of that alone didn't feel very good and left me with a sour taste in my mouth for my own character. DM, if you don't want the player to have a large sword or to have that specific fighting style or that backstory, how about you tell them, "No, I don't want it, please change it," not wait until the right moment to punish the player for having it. Alright, back to the story. Before combat started, I decided to fight using only my fists. I did have a backup weapon, but my plan was to use non-lethal attacks with the assistance of the party. I was hoping that we could resolve the whole thing quickly and maybe make peace with the barmaid. After everything was resolved, I mentioned my intention to the party. Monk runs up and lets out punch fly, dealing some non-lethal damage. The barmaid takes a swing at me with a dagger and misses. I deal a non-lethal hit. Bart sings a song, and then Sorcerer takes her turn. I cast Glue Seal on Joram. What? Why? Because I can tell he's really upset and there must be a way to solve this without violence. She drew a knife on me. Well, he did charge at her out of nowhere in a threatening manner. Alright, roll reflex. I fail, and fail the subsequent check to break free from being glued to the floor in place. Billy decides combat is over by having the ragtag team of watchmen come over to investigate the issue. They place me, and only me, under arrest while they get everyone else's statements. Most of the party tells the same story about the events of the previous night and the current situation, except for Sorcerer, who adds in that I suddenly and for no reason rushed the poor girl. One of the watchmen grabs my now beat up sword from the ground and holds it in front of me. "This what all the fuss is about?" He then snaps it in half by beating it against the wall. I get hauled away, waiting to be judged for my crimes at the nearest town. Oh wow, suddenly everybody could just snap the sword in half. I get watchmen are gonna be stronger than a regular civilian, but like dude, like I get it, it's a weapon, it can broken and stuff, but not by a regular person, not even a watchman of all things. If it was a powerful creature that just snapped it in half or cut it in half because they have like a, I don't know, another supernatural weapon, sure, I could understand it, but regular civilians and citizens and guards could just snap weapons in half. Well, what's the point of even having weapons at this point, since everybody just overpoweredly just snaps things in half, no problem. Fighters good with fighting with sword? Punish him. Fighter got lucky? Punish him. Fighter's sword is very important to the backstory? Punish him. It's like, dude, what's the point of even giving the DM a backstory if they're just gonna find a way to manipulate and ruin and destroy your fun? God forbid to give a DM some sort of other important trinket. The DM would just find a way to destroy it just to piss you off. This DM is the worst, like a conniving DM that doesn't talk to the player, but tries to solve things by punishing the player in-game without any sort of explanation when the player didn't even do anything wrong in the situation. The game ends, and I, along with most of the other players, are a bit quiet. Billy picks up how upset I am and asks to speak with me outside. I follow, bringing Monk with me. We talk for a bit around the whole situation, and I express my displeasure with some of the game events and being singled out randomly. Billy explained that he really was not purposely trying to target me in and out of game, and admits that the big sword and other unrealistic, still not sure what he means by this, features of my character really did bother him after all. If it bothers you, then why don't you tell the player instead of just destroying the character playstyle completely? What is going on with this DM? Why is he being such a dickhead about it? He adds on that he might have expressed it on a whim in game and in a very bad way. He apologized for the treatment out of game and asked if I could stay as a player. Ultimately, I told him I would give him another shot, mostly because I had become friends with everyone at the table, including Sorcerer and Billy himself. We're all pretty much the only employees at our company in the same 20-something-year-old group range, and these weekly sessions were a great way to get out of the house to meet up. I asked Billy if I could just roll up a new character, since I felt this one was pretty much done with. He said sure, and we went back inside. And yeah, that's the anticlimactic end of the adventures with the mighty swordsman Joram. He got sent to fantasy Alcatraz and I think eventually murdered in a prison riot. I do feel bad that his clan is without a leader, and that little plot thread never came up again. Spoiler, only one person's backstory was actually explored in game during the time I played with the group. I'll leave it open for whose it was. Sorcerer. I'm calling it right now, it's Sorcerer. Has to be 100% Sorcerer. I think I'll write one or more posts with a campaign and the various horrors that occurred after my new character, Ragu the Ranger, joined the party. And goody, we have that third part where we can see what exactly happens with Billy the DM destroying yet another character, because let me guess, the weapon was too powerful, the feats were too much, the DM approved the character and then realized that he made a mistake and now suddenly starts punishing the player. These are all just guesses, but I'm just going off of the pattern that's already pre-established. GM thinks player that is able to do anything at all is overpowered, nerfs the character to the ground. To address the main comment I saw in the last two posts about why I didn't just leave the game, it's complicated. Part of it was probably due to not having the biggest backbone like someone pointed out. They were all co-workers and I didn't want this stigma of leaving the game hanging over my head at work. I thought of everyone at the table as good friends and had never left the game table due to negative reasons. Finally, I didn't have a good gauge on what my tolerance for BS between friends should be. All these reasons were the excuses I made for myself. It's something I had to learn the hard way, and I'm glad I did. I will not be making the same mistakes again. When we left off, Billy had apologized to me for the in-game actions he took against my character, and asked if I would stay in the game, along with promise he wouldn't do something like that again. To be completely fair to him, the game went great for a while after the incident. I rolled up a ranger named Ragu, and there were no further issues with targeting or being harassed by NPCs like my fighter had experienced. Looking back on it, I do remember that Billy had made another comment about me playing another male character, but it wasn't enough to trigger my radar like it had the first time. Came into a good game at level 3, same as my fighter, with the same experience. We had 6 to 7 months of really good sessions when nothing really bad happened. The game itself was going really smoothly, and there were some things I genuinely liked about it. First, rules Billy had at the table. While you could bluff other PCs or attempt to steal items from them, the one thing you could never do is influence their decisions. As an example, if a player tried to convince you to follow a specific plan and rolled a perfect diplomacy check against you, you always had the agency to disagree no matter what your opposed role was. The most that would happen is your PC would think the plan described to you was really good. I'm not sure this is rules as written or something Billy just had as a rule, but I liked it. The plot was really good, if not a little generic, and the metagaming previously shown by Sorcerer seemed to pretty much stop after Monk complained to Billy. There were a few issues early on, however, although not a horror story myself, but something that always seemed to happen is when the party visited a new town, Sorcerer would get some magic item that previously belonged to her grandmother, Billy's wife's character from a previous campaign. We would walk in and somehow an NPC would recognize and greet Sorcerer, spouting praises to the great Sorcerer who was once saved the day. They would take Sorcerer to a vault, chest, shop, bank, etc. and hand her the item. Now, these items were good, like really good in some cases, but it didn't bother me too much. If Billy wanted to give his wife something to make her feel good and keep her power up, fine. The main issue with this is that the rest of the party was severely under-equipped. The classic favoritism. I mean, I get it, yeah, it's your wife, you want to try to make your wife feel a little special, but I mean, you should still look at your players, not as like, oh, the wife player or the husband player or whatever, and then the rest of the players. All the players should be on equal playing ground when it comes to your game. and everybody should be getting magical items or balancing things out or getting some sort of attention from the GM or DM, whatever you want to call it, equally, because otherwise it just looks like straight up favoritism. Sorcerer apparently gets all these magical items and recognizes, oh, this great powerful relative over another sorcerer and stuff. Like, yeah, I get it, whatever, but I mean, still, it just feels really, really weird. This is the kind of thing that builds main character syndrome, and you wonder why they post about somebody having a main protagonist syndrome, because it gets enabled. Not all of it sometimes is just born out of nowhere. Sometimes some enabler enables main protagonist syndrome, and in this situation the DM is certainly enabling the main protagonist syndrome. The first real sign in trouble came when the party was level 10. At the start of one of our sessions, Billy introduced a new player, who we'll call Nathan. Nathan was one of Billy's high school friends who had just graduated from college and moved back home. Nathan was looking to join a game, so Billy invited him to ours. Once introductions were made, Nathan introduces his character, a Cavalier. Now, there were three main problems with Nathan and his Cavalier. First, up until now, we had only been allowed to use the core rulebook for the characters with no exceptions. Bill explained that because the new players were now used to Pathfinder, he was opening up the game to include every book for people rolling new characters. He also told us we could start taking feats, spells, and equipment from other books when leveling up. While this was a little annoying, as we had already committed to level 10 worth of progression to core stuff only, overall the table was glad to have access to more things. As a side note, before talking about the second issue, Nathan is now a really good friend of mine, and he's really respectful to people's boundaries. As an example, at the end of one of our sessions, he asked me out of some sort of lunch date, which I rejected. He didn't try to pursue it any further, and we continued in and out of game as if nothing happened. All that being said, the second issue was that playing with Nathan and his Cavalier was awful. Not only did he bring in one of the more min-max creations I've ever seen, but most RP encounters would turn into combat if his character was involved. So Nathan is allowed to bring in a min-max Cavalier, but fighter can't have a big sword, big bonk stick, big bonk sharp stick, not allowed. Cavalier min-maxing? Yeah, go for it, Nathan. This GM, dude, this guy, this Billy, what are you doing, Billy? Nathan loved making himself involved. An example of his was when the party came across a traveling band being led by a lute-playing bard. Ragu started asking the bard about what cities that had traveled to and what type of music they liked playing. All of a sudden, from the top of a hill, Nathan charged and ran his lance through one of the bard members, initiating combat. When asked why he felt the need to murder a non-hostile group of musicians, Nathan responded with a shrug and said something along the lines of, "My backstory is that I hate music," or something. That is actually stupid. Hey Nathan, my backstory is that I hate annoying Cavaliers. Grabs a knife, shink. Finally, the third and biggest issue that started to become much more noticeable was our PC's wealth. When Nathan built his character, he got to buy nearly 70,000 worth of magic and non-magic items per the wealth and level table. Aside from Sorcerer and him, the rest of the party maxed out at around 6,000 to 7,000 worth of items and gold. Billy was notoriously stingy with loot. Apart from the cave we found when we were level 2, we never found another chest or got a drop from an enemy that wasn't a 30 gold used weapon. Billy's reasoning for this was that he wanted us to make use of our surroundings and exploit natural resources around us instead of relying on manufactured goods. He also said that if we did get magic items, they would feel much more special. Oh yeah, special, like when the fighter got that ring that basically forced him to cut off their finger, right? That's special. To be fair, this is an interesting idea in theory, but in practice it just wasn't consistent enough to get us close to where we should have been power-wise. On top of that, Billy used generated tables to determine what item shops had available. This was annoying, to say the least. More often than not, finding a specific potion or magic item while shopping was literally impossible. If we didn't find something we wanted from the shop, it would cost 3,000 to 4,000 more due to it not being manufactured in the region. If we did decide to buy the item at the marked up cost anyway, we would have to roll a diplomacy check to see if the shopkeeper was going to try to screw us over even more by increasing the price at the last second. Ragu might be the first character in Pathfinder's history to pay over 2,000 gold for a potion of a large person. Of course, he never got to use the potion due to Nathan stealing it out of his backpack that night after acquiring it. I don't have a gauge for that sort of thing, gotta be honest, but I would guess a potion of a large person would probably be at most 1,000. I think more ballpark of like 500. I'm gonna look it up and see. I'm looking right now on d20pfsrd.com. I'm not sure if it's an accurate resource, but we're just gonna go off with what kind of numbers they have to say. And according to them, potion of a large person is 50 gold. Not even 500, not 1,000. But here it says 50 gold. Now everyone's game is going to be a little bit different, they're going to value different items and stuff, but I'm guessing for the most part, the potion of a large person is not extremely overpowered to the point where it's going to cost a ridiculous amount of time, but it's not going to be extremely cheap either. Now going off of this, I don't know how accurate this website is, but assuming it might be accurate, or at least estimate the ballpark, potion of a large person does not seem to be extremely expensive or extremely costly. Then why the hell is a player paying 2,000 for it when here it says it's supposed to be 50? And the player couldn't even use it because Nathan decided their cavalier was just gonna yoink the potion anyway. Combats were no longer fun for the majority of the party. At first, Nathan and Sorcerer would end combats very quickly due to being significantly more powerful than the rest of the party. Although the rest of the party felt somewhat outclassed, we didn't see it as much of an issue as we could still contribute something to the fight. Billy didn't think the same way as us and instead opted to balance combat encounters around Nathan and Sorcerer. This made combat impossible for the rest of us. Got to the point where when combat would start, we would pray that enemies wouldn't target us during the first round, so we would just run to cover and stay there the whole fight. If we were targeted, 90% of the time, we would be knocked out. Monk and Bard fared slightly better than me, but still had their own issues with the combat. To one of our sessions ended, Bard addressed the table and mentioned that he would like to bring another character to the next session. Billy said it was fine and asked Monk if he would like to change characters as well, since it seemed like he wasn't having much fun as normal. Monk said he would like to and mentioned he was itching to try out a war priest. Asked if I was right if I swapped my characters to something built using more than just core, and Billy flatly and somehow angrily refused. Monk spoke up before I could have asked. Why is she the only one not allowed to change characters? Which Billy snapped back, because she already changed characters once. Billy, Monk, and Bard argued back and forth a little before I asked if it would be alright if I just changed classes instead. Billy grumbled in agreement and said, yes, that'd be fine, but you have to keep your abilities, skills, and feats as close to what you currently have as possible. The following week, over our work chat, I discussed with Billy what classes I could change into, and what stuff I would be allowed to swap out to make it work. I settled on an alchemist. In order to keep with Billy's request, I swapped out the feats I took from leveling up for the bow feats I got as ranger. The only big change I had to make was swapping my wisdom and intelligence scores so I'll be able to take and use spells. Although the solution was very hacky, Billy approved my new sheet and I brought it to the next session. At the start of the session, Billy RP'd Ragu being captured and experimented on, resulting in him losing his connection with nature and unlocking the alchemist inside of him. One time skip later, and he joined the party with his new abilities in hand. Ragu was a bad alchemist, all things considered, but with all the buffs available to him, he became pretty deadly in combat after a few rounds of setting up. On top of being able to fly and down a mutagen that greatly increased his stats, he could attach bombs to his arrows, which did a nice bit of damage with his composite bow. Monk and Bard even spent some of their starting wealth on items for Ragu, much to Billy's displeasure. And here comes the path where finally everything is balanced out, and I guess Ragu is just gonna be getting shafted again, like the fighter was. Oh man, I can't believe that you stuck around with this DM for so long. For real, imagine trying to have fun with this DM. DM says no fun allowed unless it's for my wife or my friend. Billy started to become noticeably irritated every time I did something interesting with my abilities to increase my attack. It started out small, like making me repeat math or asking where the bonuses were coming from and how I was applying everything to an attack roll. I also started to notice that at the start of every fight, even enemy would only target me while I was attempting to buff, completely ignoring the character Cavalier or the War Priest in front of them. Got to the point where I was having to start every combat from the air. This caused Billy to throw a fit and mumble about how overpowered Alchemist Flight was, despite Sorcerer also starting most combats in the air using one of the magic items given to her. Monk and Bard and even Nathan pointed out to Billy how silly that statement was, and how I wouldn't feel the need to do that if Ragu wasn't singled out every fight. The straw that finally broke the camel's back and caused myself, Monk, and Bard to quit the campaign for good occurred over the final 2 sessions. The party was traveling through a broken down temple when we were ambushed by one of the BBEG's armies. Off in the distance, Sorcerer noticed the lieutenant watching the action from afar. Billy described how he looked like he was taking note of our fighting styles and what seemed like a report, possibly going back to the BBEG's war headquarters. Billy mentioned how this guy looked like the perfect target for Sorcerer to hit, since she noticed it looking like he was weak to fire, something she could throw at him from a distance. You're telling a player, hey, that guy over there that you could totally 100% hit is weak to fire. Why are you telling Sorcerer that the enemy that you could totally 100% hit is weak to fire? Sorcerer relayed all the information back to us and said she was going to try and take him out. Ragu shouted back that he would assist if her attack failed. Sorcerer said back, sure, but I'll have you know I never fail fire magic. Her attack hit, doing a good amount of damage and caused the lieutenant to fly over and pull out a weapon. He gave a quick monologue to Sorcerer about how not many people could hit him and how she was going to be a worthy opponent. Ragu notched a bomb arrow and shouted, aye, she might be a worthy opponent, but she's not alone. My attack hit, causing his HP to drop below 0. Sorcerer gave the falling body a peace sign. Out of character, the player laughed and threw around some comments about how cheesy my one-liner was. Billy, however, was pissed. He stopped the game and demanded that I explain how I was able to apply fire damage to my arrow using a non-magical composite bow. Billy, it's a bomb arrow. Put a bomb on it. Bomb explodes, typically, with fire. I mean, unless it's some sort of like a special bomb arrow that explodes in farts and pixie dust. I don't know. I mean, most explosions are fire-based. It's an explosion for a reason. What is Billy getting on about? After explaining the bomb arrow ability and showing him the alchemist discoveries I took to enhance my bombs, the conversation turned into a mini argument. The session ended with that ending the combat, and Billy asked everyone to leave their character sheets at his apartment so he could go over them in detail over the week. The following week, Billy started the session by saying he had an announcement. So after reviewing everyone's sheets, I noticed some pretty big discrepancies. A few numbers didn't add up and a few people forgot to update things as they leveled up. I went ahead and fixed that. I also noticed that it appeared someone might have been cheating by increasing their ability scores in between sessions. You know who you are, don't do it again. Everyone at the table looked confused as Billy started handing sheets back. When he got to me, he gave a half smile and said, yours was probably the most frustrating to fix. Bruh, you approved this sheet beforehand, and the players followed the rules. I'm assuming the players followed the rules. I mean, it would be one hand if the entire table was just cheating, or the OP was cheating. I don't fully understand about Pathfinder rules, but I know alchemists have the ability to put bomb arrows, so I'm gonna be honest, I don't know much about Pathfinder, but I'm gonna assume this. If you're playing alchemist, and your whole build is to improve and enhance the ability to use bomb arrows, because that's mainly what you use, then you'd be really good at using bomb arrows with your bow. Billy's actions would only be fair if the players are cheating. I don't know if the players are cheating, but let's go ahead and see how this all turned out, and you'll see what he fixed for people. The character sheet I got back was not even close to the one I left. Items that Monk and Bard had gifted me were completely removed, and most of my skills were at full 2-3 points lower than they previously were. My flying skill was marked down to a 0. A lot of my feats were crossed out, replaced with some of the previous feats I had as a ranger. The more egregious change was my intelligence and wisdom scores were reverted back to what they were prior to becoming an alchemist. Hey, why'd you make these changes to my sheet? Specifically, why'd you put my intelligence back to an 8? Well, if you want to talk about it in front of the table, it's because you were the one who cheated. I looked at your character sheet, and this is how you had your ability scores. You can't randomly swap them around as you see fit. But we talked about this before I changed my class to an alchemist. I would never have made the change if I couldn't. No, we didn't talk about this. I wouldn't have allowed it. I want you to keep playing with us. We like you here, but you can't cheat like that to give yourself extra damage. Everyone here agrees that cheaters ruin the game for everyone. But they clearly talked about it. What is the GM talking about? Why is he backpedaling and gaslighting? Maybe you don't understand, but we talked about this over work chat. It would make no sense for me to switch to this class. I would literally have no spells, no bombs, lose the ability to do anything, but fire a bow worse than any fighter or ranger. Already was a shitty alchemist. Then I guess you can't cast. Not my fault. I don't want to make a big deal, public scene about this, so we're going to drop this now. Alright everyone, let's pick up this combat where we left off. This guy is a piece of work. What a terrible, terrible person. Not even just terrible GM, just a horrible, horrible person. That was it. I didn't want the table to see my eyes tearing up or to start crying in front of everyone, So I left the apartment and sat at the base of the stairs until Monk, who was my ride, came out a few minutes later with my stuff and drove me home. The game didn't have a next session, with most of the players saying how they were suddenly busy, too tired, or flat out didn't want to continue after the awkward scene. For a while, I avoided Billy doing work as much as possible. Work life did return to normal, but nobody bringing up the campaign or that night again. I left the company a few years after the campaign ended to move back to my hometown. Still keep up with Bard, Monk, and Nathan, all of whom helped me remember parts of the story as I was writing it. As for gaming, I took a long hiatus. Every time I thought about trying to find a new group, I would get anxious and be bombarded with negative feelings. During YouTube, are we allowed to say that again? You know, I'm just gonna say it as a C debuff. During the C debuff, however, I got in contact with some of the players from my college days, and we started playing 5e online. We've been going strong ever since, and I eventually got to try my hand at GMing for the first time. So overall, a happy ending. Billy is pretty terrible. I wouldn't say he's number one worst GM. Iris still takes that, but Billy definitely is pretty terrible. Not only is Billy not able to balance things out, but also plays favorites and then punishes player for getting involved and getting lucky. And then suddenly, whenever players is doing well again, Billy just gaslights a player and makes it feel like it's their fault and punishes the player for doing well. Billy, if you didn't want the players to kill the guy, then make him resistant to fire or put on like a reaction. Pathfinder has reactions, right? Overall, Billy is just pretty crap DM. His favoritism, his gaslighting, his horrible way of treating players is just, it's not cool, man. It's just not cool. And with that, that's going to be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales tomorrow. Bye-bye.